My father built this house with his own two hands the summer before I was born, and 61 years later, my son's wife stood in the kitchen he built and told him I was the problem in his marriage. She never once, in all the years she'd been part of this family, asked me for anything back except my absence. So, when I tell you that the woman my son married put my brother in a hospital bed over a property line, you have to understand that wasn't just an accident. That was a plan. Someone had been waiting for a reason, and she found one on a Tuesday afternoon in April. If stories like this matter to you, stick with me tonight, because what happened at the county sheriff's office 22 minutes later is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Let me tell you who I am first, and who my brother Walter is, because none of what happened will make sense without it. My name is Harold Whitfield. I'm 67 years old. I spent 38 years as a machinist at a plant outside Terre Haute, Indiana, and I retired 6 years ago with a pension, a bad lower back, and more time on my hands than I knew what to do with. My brother Walter is 71. He never married, never had kids of his own, and when our parents passed, he moved into the family farmhouse on Route 9 and never left. Walter is the kind of man who still writes thank you cards by hand. He drove our mother to every chemotherapy appointment for 14 months straight, 63 round trips, and never once complained or asked me to split the gas money, even though I offered every single time. When my daughter-in-law Renata's own father passed away 8 years back, Walter was the one who drove 4 hours each way to help her move his belongings out of a storage unit because her husband, my son Dale, had a work trip he couldn't reschedule. Walter never mentioned it again. I only found out because Renata's mother told me at a Christmas party, thanking me for raising a man like that, meaning my brother, not my son. Walter keeps bees, 14 hives along the tree line behind his house, and every fall he fills mason jars with honey and leaves them on porches up and down. Route 9, no note, no name, just a jar with a little red ribbon tied around the lid because that's what our mother always did. He's been doing it for 30 years. Nobody in that county goes without honey in October because of my brother. My son Dale is 42. He's a good man, or he was raised to be one, and I believe most of that man is still in there somewhere. He manages a regional office for an agricultural equipment company, does well for himself, married Renata about 9 years ago, and they've got 2 kids, a boy named Cooper who's 11 and a girl named Wren who just turned 8. I love my grandkids more than I have words for. But I'll tell you something I haven't said out loud to another living soul until this moment, sitting here talking to you. My son has a flaw, and it's the same flaw I had at his age, which is maybe why I never called him out on it hard enough when it mattered. Dale doesn't like conflict. He never has. When something's wrong in his house, he goes quiet instead of fixing it, and he tells himself that quiet is the same thing as peace. It isn't. I know that now better than anyone. About 4 years ago, Renata started having what she called concerns about Walter. Small things at first. She didn't like that Walter still had a key to Dale and Renata's house from when he'd helped install their storm windows years back. She didn't like that Walter would show up sometimes on a Saturday morning with donuts for the kids without calling first, the same way our mother used to just show up, because that's how our family always was, a family that didn't need an appointment to love each other. Renata started saying Walter didn't respect boundaries. She started saying it in front of the kids. Dale, being Dale, didn't want the fight. So instead of sitting his wife down and saying, "That's my uncle, that's family, that's how we do things," he started quietly making excuses. "Uncle Walter can't come to Cooper's game this weekend. We're keeping it small. Uncle Walter's not on the list for Wren's birthday party this year. We're doing a smaller guest list." Walter never said a word about it to me. He just kept sending honey jars, kept sending birthday cards with $20 bills folded inside for 2 kids. He was slowly being erased from seeing, and he told me once, over coffee at his kitchen table, "I don't want to make it harder on Dale. He's got enough on his plate." That was Walter, always thinking about everybody's plate but his own. Here's the part of the story you need to understand before I tell you what happened on the day it all came apart, because it explains everything that came after, and it's the piece that took me the longest to see clearly myself. Walter's farmhouse sits on 11 acres. and it's been in our family for 3 generations. Our grandfather built the original barn with lumber he milled himself. Walter is the last one of us who lives on that land. And because he never married, never had children, the question of what happens to that property when Walter's gone has apparently been a live topic of conversation in my son's house for a long while, a conversation I was never invited to, because it turns out I wasn't the only one being kept in the dark that year. It was a Tuesday afternoon, April the 14th, about 2:40 in the afternoon, and I was in my garage sanding down an old dresser I'd been meaning to refinish for Wren's room, something for her birthday, when my phone rang, and I saw Walter's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail because I had sawdust up to my elbows, but something told me to answer it, and I have thanked God every day since that I did. Harold. His voice was wrong, thin and shaking in a way I had never once heard from my brother in 60-some years of knowing him. Harold, I need you to come out here. Walter, what's going on? You don't sound right. It's Renata. A long pause, and I could hear him breathing hard, like he was in pain, like it hurt to talk. She came out to the property line by the east fence, said Dale wanted her to walk it, measure it, for something with the survey. I let her in, Harold. I made her coffee. And then she started asking me questions about the deed, about what I was planning to do with the land when I passed. And when I told her that wasn't really her business to be asking, she got a look on her face I've never seen on a person before. Walter. Are you hurt? She pushed me, Harold. I was standing on the porch steps and she pushed me and I went down hard onto the gravel. My hip. I think it's broken. I can't get up. I've been laying out here I don't know how long. And Harold, there's something else. Before she pushed me, she said, "You're not going to be a problem for much longer." And I didn't understand what that meant. I still don't. But I'm scared, Harold. I've never been scared of anybody in my whole life, and I'm scared right now. I did not breathe for what felt like a full minute standing in that garage. Where is she now, Walter? Is she still there? She left. Right after. Didn't even look back. Skip Marchetti next door heard me hollering, "He's coming across the field right now, I can see him." I was in my truck inside of 90 seconds, still in my work boots, sawdust on my jeans, driving out toward Route 9 faster than I've driven in 20 years. I called Dale from the road, hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped the phone twice. "Dad, hey, what's up?" His voice was easy, normal, a man in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. "Your wife just put your uncle on the ground with a broken hip and left him lying in his own gravel driveway, Dale. That's what's up." Silence on the line. Then, "That doesn't sound right. Renata wouldn't do that. He's laying in his driveway right now, Dale. His neighbor's out there with him. I'm on my way. You need to call her." He did call her, apparently, because about 10 minutes later my phone rang, and it was Renata's number. And I almost didn't answer it, but I did, because I needed to hear what she'd say with her own mouth. Harold, calm, almost bored, the way you'd sound explaining to somebody why you were a few minutes late to dinner. "I don't know what Walter told you, but he's exaggerating. He's an old man. He lost his balance. That's all that happened. He said you pushed him, Renata. I did not push that man." A pause, and something in her voice changed, got sharper, more clipped. "You always take his side. You and Dale both. You'd believe anything that man says over your own family." "He is my family, Renata. So are you, or I thought you were." And then, flat, with no warmth in it at all, she said, "Figure out what you want to believe, Harold, and let me know when you land somewhere reasonable." And she hung up on me. I want you to sit with that phrase, the way I had to sit with it, driving 75 miles an hour down a county road with my knuckles white on the wheel. Figure out what you want to believe. Like the truth was a matter of preference. Like my brother wasn't laying in gravel with a broken hip because of a decision she'd made with her own 2 hands. The man who found Walter is named Skip Marchetti. He's 64, farms the property that borders Walter's on the east side, and he and Walter have been trading tomato seedlings and fixing each other's fence lines for close to 20 years without ever once needing to be asked twice. When Skip heard Walter hollering, he didn't call me, didn't call Dale. He ran straight across that field in his work boots, got down on the gravel next to my brother, took off his own jacket, and folded it up under Walter's head, and called 911 himself. Then he stayed on the phone with dispatch the entire 19 minutes. It took the ambulance to make it out from town, and the whole time he kept saying the same 6 words to my brother, over and over, like he was keeping time with a metronome. "I've got you, Walt. I've got you." Skip Marchetti is not a man who says much. That day, he didn't stop talking. By the time I got to Vigo County Memorial, they'd already taken Walter back for imaging. Fractured hip, a deep gash along his forearm from the gravel, and the kind of shock that makes a strong man's hands shake even after the danger's passed. He looked so small in that hospital bed. My big brother, who used to sling hay bales 2 at a time well into his 60s, and when he saw me come through the curtain, the first thing out of his mouth wasn't about the pain. It was, "Did she go after Cooper and Wren? Is somebody with the kids?" That's Walter, laid up with a broken hip and worried sick about 2 children who weren't even his own blood, not by paper anyway, but were his in every way that mattered. A detective named Marcus Delgado met me out in the hallway. Careful, quiet way of talking, the kind of man who's had a lot of practice delivering bad news slow enough that it doesn't knock you over. He told me they already had a deputy trying to reach Renata for a statement. Then he told me something that made the floor tilt under me a little. Skip Marchetti, standing there in the hallway with me, remembered something, and told the detective that back in February, he'd seen Renata's car parked at the county recorder's office downtown, and thought it was odd because Dale had mentioned once that Renata handled some of the family's paperwork, but Skip hadn't thought much of it at the time. Detective Delgado made a note of that. I didn't understand yet what it meant. I just knew my stomach had dropped in a way the broken hip alone hadn't managed to do. They called me at 4:52 that afternoon and told me they needed a statement, and could I come down to the sheriff's substation on Route 41. I told Walter I'd be back inside the hour, and I drove there faster than I've driven since I was 25 years old, my heart going the whole way like a fist against my ribs. 22 minutes. That's how long it took me from the moment that phone rang to the moment I pushed open the doors of that substation. And I know it was 22 minutes because I watched every single one of them pass on the dashboard clock, thinking about my brother's honey jars with their little red ribbons, thinking about Skip Marchetti's jacket folded under Walter's head, thinking about 9 years of quietly watching my son's wife push my brother further and further out of his own family's life, and telling myself it wasn't my place to say anything. I pushed the door open, and the room went still. Not dramatic. Not everybody froze. Just a couple deputies glanced up, and a woman doing paperwork at the front counter stopped mid-sentence. A sergeant behind the counter, a broad-shouldered man named Curtis Beaumont, looked up at me, and something crossed his face. Something like dread. "Mr. Whitfield." He came around from behind the counter. "Sir, before you go back there, I need a minute with you." I stood still. "What is it?" "Your daughter-in-law's here. She came in about a half hour ago, before we'd even sent a deputy looking for her. Walked in on her own, told the desk she needed to report an incident, that your brother had gotten aggressive with her out at the property, and she'd had to defend herself." Something went cold and heavy in my chest, all at once. There is no version of this where a 71-year-old man with a busted hip attacked a woman standing on her own 2 feet. Sergeant Beaumont nodded slow. "We know that, sir. The medical exam doesn't support any struggle on her end. Not a mark on her. Your brother's account matches his neighbor's account down to the minute. And I'll tell you something else, and I apologize we didn't put it together sooner. There was a call out to that property back in the fall. A welfare check. Your brother declined to say much at the time, said it was a misunderstanding. We should have connected that to what came in today. That's on us." That's when the folder made sense to me, though I didn't have all of it yet. Renata's car outside the county recorder's office in February. 9 years of my son quietly folding under his wife's discomfort with his own uncle. This hadn't started that afternoon on the gravel. This had been building for a long, long while, and I had spent years calling it keeping the peace in their marriage, while something else entirely had been circling my brother's front porch. I told the sergeant I wanted to see her. They walked me back to a small room where Renata sat with her arms folded tight across her chest, and when she saw me come through the door, her whole face rearranged itself into something soft and wronged. the way a woman's face does when she's already decided what story she's telling. Harold, thank God. Tell them what Walter's like. Tell them how he's always been strange about that land, how paranoid he gets. Renata, my voice didn't rise. I made sure of that, because I needed her to understand I was done being managed. Deputy Beaumont tells me you went down to the county recorder's office back in February. Something behind her eyes went very still, the softness draining out of her face like water out of a sink. I don't know what that has to do with anything. It has to do with my brother's land, Renata. Land that's been in this family 3 generations. Land that isn't yours, isn't Dale's, and sure isn't anything you get to be asking questions about behind Walter's back. She didn't have an answer that held up. Her phone, sitting in an evidence bag on the table between us, kept lighting up. 11 missed calls from Dale by then. Over the following 2 days, while the arraignment happened, while the protective order got filed, while I sat with Dale in his own kitchen and watched my son's world come apart piece by piece, I watched that number on my own phone climb too. 14 calls, 22, 31. I did not answer a single one, because I was finished figuring things out on Renata's schedule. Here's what came out over the following weeks, piece by slow piece, mostly through paperwork rather than any conversation, because that's usually how truth finally arrives once you stop looking away from it on purpose. Renata had gone to a county estate attorney back in the winter to inquire about what she called clarifying the family's long-term property situation. She'd been told that without children of his own, without a will on file, Walter's farm would eventually pass through intestate succession, likely split between Dale and me, but that a living trust drawn up while Walter was alive and, in her words to the attorney, of sound enough mind to be guided, could simplify things considerably and avoid what she called unnecessary complications. She had gone to the county recorder's office in February to pull the existing property, deed records on Walter's property, on her own, without telling Dale, without telling Walter, without telling anybody. When Walter brought up at Thanksgiving that he might finally get around to writing a will and had been thinking of leaving the mineral rights to the Audubon Society for a bird sanctuary he'd always loved out, there, something he'd mentioned once, offhand, at the dinner table. I believe that's the moment things truly turned. Walter didn't make a scene about any of it, of course. He never does. He just kept sending his honey jars every October, kept coming around less and less because he didn't want to put Dale in the middle of something he couldn't yet prove, and he never said a word to me about being frozen out, because that's not who my brother is. I didn't need him to prove it anymore. I had a fractured hip in a hospital chart, and a deed inquiry with Renata's name on the sign-in log at the county recorder's office, dated a full 2 months before that Tuesday on the gravel. Renata was charged with battery on a person over the age of 60, a felony enhancement given Walter's age, though the county attorney later told us the charge could have gone further if Walter's injuries had been worse. She took a plea, probation, 40 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and a protective order keeping her 1,000 feet from Walter's property line. She never apologized to him. Not a card, not a call, not a word passed through any lawyer. I used to think I needed that from her. Some crack in all that coldness. Some sign she understood what she'd done. I don't need it anymore. Dale filed for divorce 6 weeks after that day at the substation. It wasn't an easy conversation between us. The two of us sitting on his back porch one evening in May, him staring out at nothing for a long while before he finally said, "I should have said something 4 years ago, Dad." The first time she made a comment about Uncle Walter's key, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told my son the same thing I'm telling you now. Quiet isn't peace. Quiet is just a debt you're letting build interest, and eventually somebody comes to collect it, and it's rarely you who pays. Dale rewrote his own will not long after. He named Walter as guardian for Cooper and Wren if anything should ever happen to him, alongside Renata's own sister, who'd stood by Walter's account from the very first day without hesitation. He added Skip Marchetti's name to a small trust as well, not for money Skip ever asked for or wanted, but because Dale said, "A man who folds his own jacket under a stranger's head and stays on a 911 call for 19 minutes straight ought to know somebody noticed." Skip cried when Dale told him. Said he didn't do it looking for anything back. Dale told him that was exactly why he deserved it. My brother's hip healed slower than the surgeon first hoped, but it healed. He's back on that porch every evening now, watching the light come down over the tree line where his 14 hives sit. And this past October, for the first time in 4 years, both my grandkids came out to help him fill the honey jars. Cooper tying the little red ribbons himself, careful and serious about it, the way his great-grandmother used to be. Walter told me last week, almost embarrassed to say it out loud, that he'd started leaving his porch light on again in the evenings, something he'd quietly stopped doing a while back, though he never told me why until now. He said he didn't feel like he had to watch the driveway anymore. I don't feel triumphant about any of this, if I'm honest with you. Triumph isn't the word. I feel clear, and there's a real difference between the two. And it took me 67 years and one terrible phone call on a Tuesday afternoon to finally understand what that difference is. I'm not owed an apology I know isn't coming, and I've stopped waiting on one. I'm not circling back through 9 years of family dinners wondering what I should have said sooner, because I know exactly what I should have said, and saying it now, to you, is the closest I can get to making up for the years I didn't. If this story meant something to you tonight, I'd ask you for something more than just watching to the end. Think about the quiet ones in your own family, the uncles and brothers and fathers who keep showing up with something in their hands and never ask for a thing in return. Check on them. Don't wait for a phone call at 2:40 on a Tuesday afternoon to remind you they're there. I'll be back again soon with another story, and until then, take care of the people who take care of everybody else without ever once being asked.